It was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before?
I mean, look, I've hung out with a lot of drunk people in my life, and they act exactly, that's how they act. That's exactly how drunk people talk. But she's not drunk. She's at a live interview on a stage for the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists.
It was school photo day. Mm-hmm. You remember what that's like?
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you been with a drunk person who's laying down and they're having some kind of, flashback to a simpler time in their life, and she's a happy drunk, it seems, if that's really what's happening here. If it's not, listen, there's two options here. Either she's drunk, which would excuse that kind of behavior, or she's not, which we got deeper issues. Kamala Harris is saying some really bizarre things that could potentially turn into TikTok trends. This is how bizarre they are. For example, yesterday, she arrived at the National Association of Black Journalists, the NABJ. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't somebody else go there? Yes, Donald Trump went there, and he spoke, and he answered some questions, and that was when he said the thing about how Kamala used to be an Indian, and now she's turned into a black person, and it sparked this whole new ridiculousness about Donald Trump being a racist. But Kamala Harris went there, and man, she had some weird and bizarre things, and she went full Kamala. The first thing she did was they talked about Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, and they talked about all these bomb threats, which Governor Mike DeWine told us were all hoaxes. He said yesterday, look, all these bomb threats that were coming in, all these schools that had to be evacuated, it was all hoaxes. They all came from abroad, from overseas. There weren't actual bombs. Nobody was going to bomb our schools because Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs. That's all just a hoax. But they asked Kamala Harris about it. They said, what do you think about what's going on in Springfield, Ohio? And here was her very bizarre response, which leads me to believe she's either totally clueless or totally hammered. I can't figure out which one. Maybe you can.
You know, there were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children.
These children, by the way, I guarantee they go through these kinds of things. There are fire drills every month. They know that it's not a new thing. We used to have tornado drills in North Carolina. We had hurricane drill where you had to go put your head under the desk because desks can save you from, it was really anything. In the 80s, it was the nuclear attacks we had to practice for, and we would stand under our desks, which apparently were made out of 14 pounds of lead. I didn't know. But they protect you from anything. Now she's mad because these kids who got dressed up for picture day had to evacuate until they realized it was a false alarm. She's leading you to believe, I guess, that these photos, these kids will never get their photos. They're never going to get their pictures in whatever yearbooks they have, or grandma's not going to get her 5x7 from Olin Mills this year because Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have perpetuated this myth that the Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs. How are you ever? These kids will be unphotographed because of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Now, there's a couple things about this statement. First of all, I remember picture day, and I remember showing up at school and going, oh, it's picture day. I totally forgot. I remember flipping through my yearbook and seeing most kids in some kind of like Dead Kennedys t-shirt or something that said Billabong on it. Panama Jack was real popular. I remember a lot of Panama Jack t-shirts. I remember kids with stains. Their hair was unkempt. They had the Kool-Aid, little Kool-Aid stains coming up because no one remembered it was picture day. Sure, there were always a handful of the kids whose parents did them up and made sure they were on. Most of us were like, oh, I guess this is what I'm taking my photo in. It's picture day. And the second thing is, this is not Kamala Harris's picture. This is not picture day 1968. This is not the 70s or 80s where you had one shot of a photo. If I showed you my phone right now, you would be shocked and awed at how many photos I have of my children. And they are way better than the picture day photos. But Kamala Harris wants you to think this is the worst thing that happened in Ohio. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance said that Haitian immigrants have that by the way, Kamala Harris has dumped there. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Alejandro Mayorkas opened up the border, went and got Haitian immigrants, dropped them, unbeknownst to the citizenry there in Ohio, in Springfield, Ohio, where it's overloaded their medical facilities, overloaded their school systems, overloaded their government. They're not able to house these people. Law enforcement is through the roof with calls. There are ducks and geese gone missing, cats gone missing. It is treacherous. There are TikTok videos of men and women talking about the threats they've gotten from Haitian immigrants. One guy said, "My family was threatened with machetes." This is what's going on in our communities because of Kamala Harris, because of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And they're not denying it. Kamala Harris isn't saying, "Oh, you know what? We didn't actually dump a bunch of Haitians in Ohio and say, hey, Buckeye State, it's your problem now." She's not denying any of that. She's saying, you know what? There's Haitian immigrants there, but you know what they didn't get to do? They didn't get to go to photo day.
It was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who are dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before.
I mean, come on. The school, 50% of the kids in these schools are Haitian immigrants. They don't know what photo day is. They're trying to find teachers who are bilingual because these students do not speak English. So I really feel like photo day is the least of their worries. Then they asked her about black men. They asked Kamala Harris about black men and black male voters. And here's what they asked her. It was a pretty decent question, I thought. Here's what they asked her about black male voters. Listen carefully.
Black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted black men at your residence.
Yep.
By the way, sorry, that comment. I'm sorry. I'm 12. By the way, that just made me. That one just made me giggle. Here, I'll try to. You've hosted black men at your residence. Yep. Yeah, we all know. Here.
Black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted black men at your residence.
Yep.
You have engaged black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour.
Mm-hmm.
But polling shows that some black men, particularly young black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket.
Wait, what? What do you mean? Hold on. We're operating now from the assumption that black men aren't in anybody's pocket? Isn't that exactly what Joe Biden told Charlemagne the God? Isn't that what he told Charlemagne the God years ago when Charlemagne the God had him on his show when he was on the Breakfast Club, and he said this?
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I'm sorry, that sounds to me like somebody working from the assumption that the black voters are in his pocket. We should never work from the assumption that black voters are in anybody's pocket.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I didn't hear her saying that. I didn't hear her saying anything about that back then when Joe Biden was on an urban radio station talking to Charlemagne the God and saying, black voters are in my pocket. And if you're a black male voter and you're thinking about voting for Donald Trump, guess what? You ain't black. And if you are, you're in my pocket. It was really It was really interesting to see. These black journalists, by the way, the National Association of Black Journalists, I've seen a lot of people say they coddled Kamala Harris. They treated her with kid gloves. They threw her softball questions and she just knocked them out of the park. I didn't see any of that. What I watched and I saw were actual journalists who were kind of annoyed with Kamala Harris, not just avoiding and evading interviews, but sitting down for an interview and using the same old boring stuff over and over again, and totally trying to evade the question. She was dodging questions like Donald Trump dodges bullets. That's what was happening yesterday. And there was this one instance where they talked about assault weapons. And Kamala Harris, here's what happens with Kamala Harris. And Tim Walz, both of them, they were given like 7 things to say. So when they talk about, for example, the economy, the first thing they say is, well, I grew up a middle class and my mom was a single mom and she worked 2 jobs and she didn't buy a house until I was a teenager. And I lived in a neighborhood with lots of blue collar workers. Everyone cared about their lawn, all that crap. She starts every single question about the economy the same exact way. When they talk about guns, she always says, well, as you know, I'm a gun owner and Tim Walz is a gun owner and no one's trying to take away your guns. It happens every single time. You could just stop Kamala Harris on the street and say, hey, what kind of gun do you own? And she would immediately, her mind goes like this, gun, 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 response. Well, as you know, I'm a gun owner and Tim Walz is a gun owner and nobody's trying to take away your guns. And to prove it, here's a question yesterday from the National Association of Black Journalists to Kamala Harris about guns.
How will you address the issue of the use of handguns? Because a push for an assault weapons ban only addresses a significant but small part of the problem.
So, first of all, yes, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anybody's guns away from them. But we do need an assault weapons ban.
Sorry, I'm a gun owner, Tim Walz is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anyone's guns away. But we are pursuing an assault weapons ban, which would take people's guns away. I don't know if you caught that. I just wanted to, I'll let her speak.
Weapons are designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly,
Yes,
and
an
have
assault
no
weapons
place,
ban,
and have
yes.
no place, I'm gonna get to it,
Yes.
and have no place on the streets of a civil society. We need universal background checks, which, to your point about handguns, is about saying that it is just reasonable to want reasonable gun safety laws that say we should do background checks that we ought to know. It's just reasonable. You might want to know before someone can buy a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You might just want to know.
Okay, now, if it were really a softball interview, if she were being handled with kid gloves, if she was allowed to get away with stuff like she does, with every other interview, the National Association of Black Journalists would have just let her go. But they didn't, because the question again was about handguns. And she started talking about assault rifles, and then she started talking about a universal background checks. And that's not at all the issue with handguns on the streets in our inner cities, in urban societies, with gang members, with black men and women. Black men are not getting killed by guns because people failed a background check. And had it been a softball interview, they would let her go. But listen to what happens next.
And respectfully, we do understand that.
But you're asking
Yes.
about...
I'm
you're
asking
asking
specifically about handguns, because many of those handguns aren't purchased in places.
Universal background checks apply to handguns.
Yes.
They do.
But in
And
many instances, those handguns aren't even bought lawfully.
I mean, this is unheard of. Who knew? Did this journalist not get the memo that she was just supposed to let Kamala Harris prattle on and say any ridiculous drunken stuff that she wanted to say and not question her on it? But yeah, here's a woman who's done her job, who's investigated and is trying to get a straight answer out of the vice president about handguns. Yeah, look, respectfully, we're talking about handguns on the street. Well, you need a universal background check for those. Yes, but these are guns that are not bought lawfully. These are illegal weapons that you buy out of the trunk of someone's car.
Which is why I also have been very adamant for years. In fact, I myself protested at a gun show probably 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, there it is, the gun show. The gun show. I was protesting at the gun show. Mwah, mwah. The gun show loophole. This is what's coming next. The gun show loophole, which has absolutely nothing to do with the gun violence and the murder and the proclivity for violence and the bullets flying all around downtown Chicago and New York City and Washington, D.C. Those carjackers in D.C. aren't jacking cars with weapons they bought at the gun show. I don't know if you've ever been to a gun show, but first of all, the loophole is a myth. You cannot walk into a gun show with cash and walk out with a handgun and a whole bunch of rounds of ammo. It doesn't work that way. It works like any other gun store. And if it doesn't, you're not at a gun show. You're at some kind of black market gun dealer. But if you go to the Shrine Auditorium on a Saturday, or if you go down to the fairgrounds on a Sunday for the gun show, you have to go through every single background check. You have to go through you have to have your license. You have to be up on this, that, or the other. They're not just, and there's tracking. You have to keep paperwork on all these things. Kamala Harris is about to perpetuate the myth of the gun show loophole. Listen to this.
About the gun show loophole and why we need to close that. Because what ends up happening is that gun shows at flea markets, gun dealers are not, under existing law in the past, required to register their sales. And so you are exactly right that a lot of homicides, for example, a good number of them, I don't have the statistic in front of my mind, are committed with illegally purchased guns. And that's why we need to address each entry point in the issue, including universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and what we need to do as a general matter to focus not only on reaction to crime, but prevention of crime.
Here's how these guns end up on the street. It has nothing to do with the gun show loophole. We know that. Everybody knows that except for drunken Kamala Harris. It has nothing to do with the gun show loophole. What happens is that let's say, go to a gun show. I purchase a weapon. I show my ID. I show my license. I fill out the paperwork. I wait until I'm cleared. I then have a record of the transaction. I have a record of the weapon. The sales agent, the guy or girl who I bought the weapon from, has a record of the transaction, a record of the sale. I take it home and I put it in my gun safe, and then I go on vacation. And 2-3 weeks later, I guess I don't go on vacation that long, 2-3 days later while I'm on vacation, somebody breaks into my house, breaks into my gun safe, steals that gun, drives down to the inner city and sells it to somebody looking for a weapon for $50, $100, $200, whatever it is. That person goes and commits a crime. The cops bust them, they take the gun, they look at it, and they trace it back to me. And then they trace it back to the gun show. And I say, that gun was stolen while I was on vacation. That's how these weapons are ending up. That's the question about the gun show loophole or universal background checks has no issue with the violence that these journalists are looking to get answers for. Kamala Harris has no answers because she doesn't understand the question, or she just doesn't have answers. Probably a little bit of both. The gun that Donald Trump, the crazy guy, Ryan Wesley Ruth, had a gun on him, and the serial number was scratched off. It was you couldn't even see it anymore, and that's difficult to do. That's not a gun you buy at a gun show. You can't buy a gun at a gun show without the serial number on it. If the serial number has been obliterated, nobody is going to sell you that gun at a gun show. Nobody is going to sell you that gun with a required background check or even ask for your ID. It's all just a smokescreen. It's to make her sound like she thinks she knows what she's talking about, like she cares about gun violence, like she cares about law and order, when she doesn't care about any of it, and she doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't know, and she doesn't care. And she may also be teetotaling. Again, unconfirmed, unsubstantiated rumors. I'm just saying it seems that way just by the way she's acting.
You know, there were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like?
That wasn't all. There's more. There's more. There's more. There's this whole thing about, they asked her about abortion, and they asked her a really good question that, again, she refused to answer. They asked her, look, you're talking about putting, like, codifying Roe versus Wade. You want to bring back Roe versus Wade. And one dude looked at her and said, you know, in Roe versus Wade, there was actually protection against abortion in the third trimester. Roe versus Wade said you could not have an abortion in the third trimester. And he wants to know, are you bringing that back as well? Or are you just going to blow the whole thing out of the water and it's abortion anytime, anywhere, any place for anyone?
So do you similarly support also codifying Roe's restrictions, which allowed states to ban abortion in the third trimester of pregnancy unless necessary to save the mother's life?
We need to put the protections of Roe v. Wade back into law. And when that bill gets passed by Congress, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand what is happening in our country. Over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans, because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
I don't understand this line. This is their thing, too. They call it the Trump abortion ban when Donald Trump had nothing to do with banning abortion. Donald Trump wasn't in office when Roe v. Wade was overturned. That didn't happen on Donald Trump's watch. Donald Trump was kicking it at Mar-a-Lago. That didn't happen. Donald Trump has never issued an abortion ban, nor could he. It's the individual states. So how is it that they continue to talk about the Trump abortion ban? Add to that the fact that Donald Trump has repeatedly said, I'm not for a federal abortion ban. I'm for states' rights. I'm for the states allowing their legislatures and their citizens to make their own choices the way the Constitution has always really required it or deemed it or planned it to be. Oh, I see. It's a Trump abortion ban because Donald Trump handpicked 3 Supreme Court justices. Fun fact, every Supreme Court justice has been handpicked by the president in charge. Donald Trump isn't the first. They always say it like Donald Trump handpicked these 3 Supreme Court justices. Yeah, guess what? Joe Biden handpicked Ketanji Brown Jackson because he wanted a black woman and he got one. He said, I don't know who I'm going to pick, but I'll tell you this, it's going to be a black woman. And so he went out and he said, find me black women who can sit on the bench. And they did. And she was handpicked by Joe Biden. Donald Trump handpicked 3 constitutional conservatives because he said, I don't know who I'm going to pick, but they're going to be constitutional conservatives and they're going to come from this list. And people voted for Donald Trump. And when it came time to pick the first one, he goes, Gorsuch, you're up. And when it came time to pick the second one, Kavanaugh, put down your beer, you're up. And then when it came time for the third one, which nobody even really saw coming, he went, oh my gosh, who we got left? Coney Barrett. All right, come on, lady, take a seat. All Supreme Court justices are handpicked. Sonia Sotomayor, guess what? She didn't win a lottery. She was handpicked by Barack Obama because he wanted one of the most liberal judges he could find. Elena Kagan. She didn't just get dropped off on the steps of the Supreme Court by the stork. Would have had to be a big stork or multiple storks. You might never, I'm not, that's neither here nor there. Just because she's a full-grown adult, not because, and it doesn't matter. But she was handpicked by Barack Obama as well because he was looking for liberal justices who didn't care about the Constitution and would rule any way he or any future socialist would want them to rule. It's not unique. It just happened to be Donald Trump's turn 3 times. Who do you blame for that? I blame Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but that's just me. And then they asked about joy. They asked Kamala Harris about joy.
Why is joy important to you to insert into this election? And what do you make of Republicans using that as a way to suggest that you're not a serious candidate?
Well, sometimes I think, and I'll say to whoever the young people are who are watching this, there are some times when your adversaries will try and turn your strength into a weakness. Don't you let them. Don't you let them. I find joy in the American people. I find joy and optimism in what I see to be our future and our ability to invest in it. I find joy in the ambition of the people. I find joy in the dreams of the people. I find joy.
In a bottle of Jack Daniels. I find joy in a fifth of Tito's. I find joy in a large box of Chablis. That's what I imagine. I'm sorry,
in building community. I find joy in building coalitions. I find joy in believing that the true measure of the strength of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but who you lift up. And I think we should all find joy and have a sense of optimism about who we are as Americans and what we mean to each other and what we can do to lift each other up.
Yeah, I find joy when I look at the polls, because notice she didn't say that. Notice she didn't say, I find joy looking at the polls, because if she were looking at the same polls I'm looking at, there would be no joy for her at all.